Norwich City's win over Southampton may not have been divine intervention, but it was the hand of Jov that sealed it for the Canaries at Carrow Road. Back-to-back home wins for the first time since January. 7 points from 9 at home under Philippe Clement. It's been quite some transformation for the Canaries. Welcome to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy, Davitt and Samuel Seaman after, as I mentioned, the Canaries 2-1 win over in-form Southampton. And Paddy, you've got to hand it to them, haven't they? It was a good day for hands at Carrow Road. Vladan Kovacevic saving a penalty with his hands. Jovon Makama scoring with his hands. Lots of hands in the air in celebration at the end. Pretty good, that.
Yeah. I don't care which part of his anatomy it went in, really, and neither did the officials, clearly. So that point, all flippancy aside, was put to Philippe Clement post-match, and as he pointed out, he hadn't really seen it back, the Makama goal, the match-winning goal, but he said, if you want to bring it more broadly into a VAR debate, then they've probably fallen the wrong side in his tenure. So, I don't think there'll be too many dwelling on that from a Norwich perspective. And let's be honest, we've had enough low blows collectively this season, anything to do with that football club, that, maybe they're due a slice of fortune here and there. But if you want my opinion, I think they probably merited that win anyway, irrespective of the circumstances of the actual winner. And that is a real statement of intent from a group of players who not that long ago looked like they were kind of in a bit of a daze towards League One, and albeit there's still work ahead, as Philippe Clement also made the point after the game, but for me they'll be out of the bottom three come the other side of Christmas, and it's remarkable the impact he's already had, because that today was very much his imprint on that group of players. Given it was an informed, probably the most informed Championship team in terms of the form line. And even when they went 1-1 and they equalised in the second half within 4 minutes, Norwich go out in front again. You just would not have seen that, I don't think, under the previous management. And it would have probably gone the other way. And they'd have walked off that pitch yet again, having been defeated. But and for me, encapsulated by the last sort of 10 minutes of normal time and then 7 minimum of additional time. Home fans really bought into it, understood that they needed some help, those players, dragging them over the line, the volume levels, the decibels, that's as loud as I've heard Carrow Road this season for me. That period there, that 15-20 minute period, and to use Philippe's words, synergy, and that was a very unified stadium, it felt like, at the final whistle, and long may that continue.
Yeah, and I mean, Sam, to sort of zoom out before we zoom in, this is, as Paddy said, a team that at the start of November didn't look like it knew how to win football games. Just looked like it was just in a habit of being beaten up and was completely on the canvas. Didn't seem like any kind of resurrection was going to be likely or possible or probable. And from there, as we said, unbeaten at home. You add what they've done on the road, which has been good performances, but also taken points at Sheffield United, Birmingham and Watford obviously ended in defeat, but Watford probably deserved a little bit more out of. And even this week, I mean, Philippe Clement gave those of us who were at the press conference on Friday a quiz, as he likes to do, to keep us on our toes a little bit, and he asked, which are the three informed teams in the Championship. I think you got 2, Paddy, in fairness, didn't you? And I got Preston, so we didn't do too bad between
QPR.
us. QPR were also up and around there, yeah.
Was it Preston?
It was Preston, yeah.
I thought you said QPR too.
No, did I say? No, I said Preston, I think.
It was Preston,
it was Preston, yeah.
But
I think
didn't he say bottom half? Anyway, I don't know why we're going down this tangent, but I thought in answer to...
Oh, maybe I did say QPR.
I thought it was QPR.
Yeah, I think it was QPR, yeah.
We got
this is why we're not very good at quizzes, ultimately. But you look at this week, and obviously we'll look ahead to Preston a little bit later on, but Sheffield United had won 4 on the spin prior to playing Norwich. They get a very good point. Amankel Forson maybe have finished it off, which he could have done. They leave there with a win. They didn't. It's a point. It's fine. Today, Southampton, who've won, I think, 6 of 7 since November the 4th of most goals, most points, top all the form tables that there are. Norwich City, as Paddy said, not just beat them, but had to work really hard in stages. And yes, had to ride their luck, of course, as well. But ultimately, probably merited, out of that hard work and out of that ability to grit in and grind, and the organisation that they had, deserve 3 points. I mean, it's a remarkable transformation that we've seen over the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I think the opposition makes a lot of the performance, which Philippe Clement said was the best he's seen since he's taken over, and I tend to agree with. I think if you just take Norwich at face value, they looked quite similar at QPR, and they probably had, well, they definitely had more of the ball and they dominated more of the game. But when you think about the players that Southampton have, the sort of team that they have, Eka and the job he's done with them so far, the form that you mentioned, for every reason, apart from being away from home, Southampton went into that game as the favourites. And yet, although they had a bit less possession, Norwich, I thought, controlled large periods of the game, created a lot of chances, looked good value for the win in the end, and that second half was really, really good. So I think these teams that they've performed against, performing against them shows where Norwich are at the moment. And I think going into some games that probably after Preston get, I don't want to say easier, but they look like they're a bit more in Norwich's favour. I think it bodes pretty well, and it's not like they're only performing in the big occasions or anything like that. It was a pretty dominant performance against Oxford as well. They probably should have won that one. Watford have kind of had up and down momentum this season, and Norwich probably should have won that as well. So I think the signs are all pointing in the right direction, and to be honest, it's full credit to Philippe Clement, because I feel like the way that football is at the moment, there's a lot of focus on what a head coach can do with transfer windows, with signing players, with reshuffles and different staff, and the amount of time it takes. And I do think it takes more time than probably a lot of head coaches are given, but ultimately it is also their job to improve players, to pick the right ones, to choose the tactics that suit their players best. And Clement, faced with a squad that Liam Manning, who clearly has managed a lot of games at this level, is a decent coach, couldn't get anything out of really. To get exactly the same group of players performing in such a different manner, I think is real testament to his skills as a head coach. And as much as the players deserve credit, because to be fair, a lot of them are stepping up in ways that I don't think anybody could have foreseen earlier on in the season, I think Clement has to take the large majority of that credit, because they look completely different.
And I think the element that we saw today, Paddy, to me, is the way that they press, the structure that they press. And I thought they struggled 10 minutes. I thought they had to figure it out. Southampton tried to open that space up in front of their back line to get the ball into the feet of Azaz and Cienza and Armstrong. You can understand why the quality that they had. But when they did just leave McLean and Matson back a little bit and blocked it off, you could see Southampton throughout that first half and actually throughout the game get pushed back. And some stages of that game, it was Norwich City having probably 5 players camped in the penalty area trying to prevent them from playing out. It was a very clever use of what they did off the ball. And again, we spoke about this last time with Clement, but that structure, that clarity that the players seem to have, he's getting huge responses out of. We could sit here and name 5, 6, 7 of them, but as collectives and as individuals, I think it's hard to look at any player who's been in the team for the last 6 games and maybe in that run beforehand, not necessarily the players who've been out, and say that the vast majority of them haven't improved under him, which again is a testament to the work that he's done in the early weeks so far.
Yeah, I mean it's squarely at his door and his coaching staff. Some he inherited, some he brought with him, because it is the same group of players and they were underperforming massively. So he is the common denominator, and of course, it's that intangible. You get some momentum. That was a big 3 or 4 days previously at Carrow Road when they should have beat Oxford but walked off the pitch with a draw, and then did beat QPR off the back of the real toxicity that had unfolded at Carrow Road over the previous 7 or 8 games, including one in the League Cup to Southampton earlier in the season. That I'm sure would have really injected some belief into the group of players. Human nature, they will have known him from afar. There might be, as always with this situation, when a new manager walks through the door, there'll be a group of players who maybe know players around the game who've worked with Clement, and you get, I'm sure, these anecdotes fed back into that Norwich changing room. But they are, as much as the fan base are, maybe us as well, are looking to see, okay, we can see this guy's pedigree, we can see his coaching CV that's brought him to Carrow Road, looks impressive, but that's from afar. What is he like inside the camp, as it were? And the nature of it is those players would have been looking for signals, very early signals, and how he carries himself, the messaging, the way he sets his teams up, what he's asking them to do in and out of possession, the one-to-one sort of stuff as well. And you can see all of those strands coming together now in terms of the cohesion on the pitch. You know, even against, and in the last 2 games they've played arguably 2 of the most informed sides in the division. They've been better in most facets of the game for me, and that's a hell of a rise from where they were under the previous head coach. So, and as I say, then it becomes easier to a degree, but as he would do, because he's a very experienced head coach, he was very keen to. I mean, he uses this phrase: "We cannot have satisfaction now." There can't be now, off the back of today, particularly, a feeling that they've cracked it, or that they're there now, or that they don't need to put in the same levels of effort and commitment to get the same results. They will have to do all of that and much more, as he cautioned. And if they don't, this guy will be on their cases. And you get the sense players, young and old, in that dressing room know this isn't a guy you take liberties with. And you know, whether that's a reflection on the previous incumbent or the one before him, even who knows? But the reality is, head coaches are measured by what's happening on the pitch, what are the results, what are the performances, and albeit the sample is still relatively small, 6 games is it now, so we won't run maybe to definitive conclusions, but it is very difficult to see a world now where they regress and whether they don't kick on now with more players coming back, with a January window on the horizon. There was a funny line in the presser tonight where, off the back of that, talking about nobody can rest on their laurels, he then actually referenced that includes the ownership and Ben Napper, who need to continue doing their work with a view to January. So, you know, that is a head coach.
He started that early, hasn't he?
I know, he has, yeah. And he's not going to take his foot off that particular throttle either, because he will know that as much as he's getting a tune out of this group and he's getting injured players back all the time, they do lack, I'm sure, certain positions, certain profiles for what he wants. And he's clearly hoping that they can address that in January, and that will then build on what is, at the moment, some very, very good foundations, I think. And
I think it's not just the players, Sam. I think, as Paddy alluded to earlier, it's the fan base that are responding to this as well. We saw, I'd agree, I think the last 15 minutes, the reaction at the final whistle, as loud, as jubilant as I've heard the place in it in a long time, and understandably so, because of the context of what we've seen and what they weren't doing at home. But it's just nice to walk around the place, and I'm sure you get this, speaking to fans before and after the game, and see smiles on faces and see some optimism. And it was almost like the energy and the hope had been sapped out of everybody by the end of that Liam Manning spell. It's not all down to him. I don't want to pin this as all being on Liam Manning's shoulders, because I think, as we discussed it for loads of hours in great detail, it's not. And some of those things that we spoke about then are still true today, with Norwich City still winning games. But it's just nice to have that hope and that optimism returned into people, and to feel that tangibly inside Carrow Road. I mean, that Leicester game, there were protests outside both stands. Players were, I've mentioned this a few times, being marched around the pitch by police, and now, you know, they're being serenaded off, and people are staying to the end to applaud them off and to show gratitude for the effort that they've put in. That is, even that aspect is such a transformation.
Yeah, it's definitely nicer and easier to ask people to delay their journeys home to speak to me about Norwich City after they've won a game than when they've lost, as was obviously the case for, was it the first 7 games of the season, home games of the season?
8 including, Southampton in the Cup where they got beat 3-0. Look at that, even as a transformation.
Yeah, and I got the sense that they were always ready for that. I think it wasn't a situation where necessarily they needed to be in the playoffs for people to start responding well to what they were doing, or even really for it to be too dependent on results. I think what we've seen at Carrow Road over a number of years really is that if they see the elements of performance that they want to see, if they see signs of quality, they're not just frustrated that every attack is slow or is going backwards, or there's a lack of quality at the end of it, or they feel like there's a lack of intensity in the team, then I think they were always happy to respond in a good way and to get behind the team. But there's obviously nothing at all for them to respond to in those first 8 games of the season. And I think now they're seeing a team that they kind of want to reflect. I think the intensity is actually a really big point, because you look at the way that teams play, I feel often like the atmosphere in a home stadium reflects how teams look off the pitch, because you look at kind of Bramall Lane, Sheffield United, I always felt like their style of play was very intense, very direct, high pressing, getting in opponents' faces, and the atmosphere for a long time when they were playing football like that was exactly like that, kind of similar like at Leeds and places like that. Whereas even if a team is winning all the time, if you're playing kind of slow, ponderous football, if the tactics aren't particularly proactive or aggressive or attacking, I don't think fans necessarily respond particularly well to that. So even if Norwich had been winning with Liam Manning's style of play, I think obviously it would have been slightly more positive, but I don't think you would have had this response to the game, because people want to see after 85 minutes a striker sprinting to a defender. They want to see them, putting their body on the line to keep the ball in the corner. Those are the sorts of things that for me really raise the atmosphere, and I don't want it to just get drawn into kind of desire and work rate and things, obviously all of which are important for high pressing football and things like that. It's also about tactics and the kind of intellectual ideas behind it. The intentions behind it, I think, are really important. And now they've got a head coach who not only seems to be good at the man management element and improving individual players, but also I think has reasonably good alignment with what Norwich fans want to see and what creates a good atmosphere. And I would say that that synergy that he keeps talking about is there, not only in terms of the players play well and the fans cheer them because they're winning, but also in terms of kind of how the place feels and how that plays into the sort of football that they're playing, which I think is encouragingly proactive.
Yes, indeed. I wasn't being rude there when you were speaking. I was trying to get up the championship table, because obviously the luxury we have with an earlier kickoff is you get to see kind of the games and the teams come in as and when they happen. Those games have, I think, all finished now. Let me double check. They have all finished now. Portsmouth have beaten Blackburn. So actually, Paddy, in terms of league position, Norwich haven't moved. They're still 23rd, but clearly the gap has shortened. They were 5 points at the start of the day, 3 points now, and as you mentioned, ahead of a run of games, and we know the festive period can kind of make or break team seasons and even change them. And actually, you look at, if they could get themselves up to the 20 mark, then there's what, half of the league that are on 20 or in the 20s. Birmingham in 12th on 29. So only, don't want to get too far ahead, but they're kind of 12 points off Birmingham. So speaking about that in terms of I'm not going there, in terms of the level of possibility, but clearly, and this is the way I was going to frame the point to you, is for all, and you mentioned this earlier, I know Philippe Clement did as well, for all of that positivity, this is kind of the bar now, this is the standard. They've shown what they can do, not just today, but over the last few weeks. If they want to change it so they're not 23rd in the table, and we can begin to look up, maybe not quite the dizzy heights of the playoffs, but certainly into the mid-table and beyond, these have to be, as Philippe Clement talks about, the foundations for something greater still to come. There are still gears they need to find from this performance today.
Yeah, well, it comes down to consistency, doesn't it, ultimately? And he would argue that's performance and process. But that then will translate into results. I think that is 6 games now, 2 defeats out of those 6. One, Watford, I don't think anybody would dispute that was unfortunate. Yes, they didn't help themselves, but the performance level merited something better than a defeat. So for me, you're really talking about opening day, Birmingham. He's had 3 days to work with the players, less than some of the internationals that he was getting back. Birmingham were very good that day, and that is why I don't think it will be long before they are above that cut line, that bottom 3 line, because 6 games in, 5 out of those 6 reasonably. 4 they did get something. They should have got something out of Watford. And so, as I say, I think now the next block of 6 games, including some very winnable home games over the festive period, with players coming back, it's just very difficult now to see a scenario where, and of course there will be days when things don't go for them, and he has talked about this. It won't be. He used the phrase again today. It won't be all linear. It won't just be like a ramp now and on and on and on they'll go. There will be setbacks. That's the Championship. They'll fall the wrong side of some key decisions. Maybe they fell the right side today of some key decisions. But I think the underlying curve now is going to go in a positive direction, and with so many games left, I mean, we're not even at the halfway point of the season, are we? We're approaching it, I know, but so really, you just take a step back and think they've got so many games now between now and May that with this guy in charge, I mean, I think, I'm not going to speak for you boys, but I at no point have I ever thought they're going down under this guy since he walked through the building, and because of his track record and because of his clearly,
he just strikes me, and I wrote this in my column. Just seems in control of it.
Well, he is.
It doesn't feel like again. I don't want to keep coming back to Liam. I almost feel, but we have to in nature of comparison. But they kind of felt like everything was happening in and around Liam Manning, that he wasn't really in control of it, and it was just trying to find some way to stop the bleeding or to stem a result or to get themselves through the next 3 games. With him, it feels, and this is probably reflective in the football, proactive, energetic. It feels like he's kind of grabbed the situation and is willing, by force or otherwise, to pull this group forward. That feels to me like the difference in the last few weeks.
Well, microcosm, Sheffield United at the end of that game, they've got themselves back on level terms. Previous management, I think they regress to the edge of their own box, and they try and by hook or by crook retain that point that they've put on the board and try and keep the ball out of Vladan Kovacevic's net. This guy went attacking sub after attacking sub after attacking sub, and obviously Forson has that unbelievable chance at the death. So that for me is the crystal clear dividing line between this guy and his predecessor. That in that environment, at Sheffield had won 4 on the spin. Chris Wilder, passionate home crowd, some good players, Premier League grade players, you could argue. There was no thought, not even a sliver of a thought in everything he did in terms of his actions with introducing players, in terms of what he wanted to see from his team, other than we're going to go, and we're going to try and get the win here. So, with the head coach setting that direction of travel, if you're a player, I'd imagine you cannot wait to play for this guy. And you can see now, it's evident in terms of the individuals, Maatsen being the primary example, who have flourished already and blossomed under this guy, that he is clearly relishing working with a head coach who is giving him that platform and that confidence and that self-belief to, no, I believe in you, you're a very good player, you haven't shown what I know you've produced back in Denmark, go and show me what you're all about. And he's responded to that. And for him, you can read McConville, Makama maybe to a lesser degree, Kellen Fisher. Again, he referenced him today. He said he's been excellent in this period. Mm-hmm. So many case studies. Jacob Wright, I thought him today in the 10, absolutely superb. Following on from that 50 minutes or so in the 10 role at Sheffield United. What a piece of coaching that is, to spot that guy can go further up the pitch and his technical ability.
How good was that pass in the first half outside the boot
to Makama? Yeah.
So
again, that's a feather in Clement's cap. It's also kudos to Jacob Wright that he has responded, and he's a good example actually because he could not get a kick for love nor money after his red card against Middlesbrough. How many games did he sit on the bench? New head coach comes in, showing him that trust, showing him that faith, and he's repaying him with the performance levels he's produced in what has been a problem position, that one in behind Sargent, up until today, of course, and then Makama. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting now to see what is the ceiling with this head coach, this group of players, added to in January, hopefully, between now and the end of the season. I don't want to run away with playoffs, here we come, because I think that would be a stretch.
Far too many mentioned of the playoffs already.
You started it, but
I think Sam started it actually, but it's fine.
But as I say, to reiterate what I said previously, any sense that anybody had about relegation under this guy, forget it, put it to the side. That's not being complacent. That's just being factual, and we've seen now in a body of work the impact he has, and for me, it's now just how good this season looks from here. How high is the ceiling they can get to? And, that's quite an exciting sort of period to be in, which is so far removed from where we were. Probably only, you talked about Leicester, and that was the crescendo of fan protest around Carrow Road and that negativity and that regressive trend that was sucking the life out of this team, fan base, football club maybe to an extent. That was all about avoiding League One at all costs. Now it's about how high they can go, not how low they can fall.
Yes, absolutely, and it's. I think it sums it up nicely, doesn't it? I mean, how many mentions of Ben Napper's name has there been, apart from Philippe Clement asking for more in January in the last few games and weeks? There hasn't been, because of what they've been able to do on the pitch. Doesn't mean those issues are gone or those questions are answered, but I think it just shows how well Philippe Clement has come in, commanded that presence and that space of being Norwich head coach, but also the ability to kind of repair and drag people with him. We mentioned dragging, where they are in their situation. He's dragged the fans with him as well, which has been really positive. And I mean, purely on a football point, Sam, I've mentioned the pressing in detail, the better structure. I've enjoyed the intent to their play, and it's basic things in terms of when they win the ball, they try and play forward. They can't always, naturally, because that's football, and if you win it on the byline, you can't play forwards. But in general terms, if Pelle Matson has won the ball, he's tried to then play forward, and that intent, that positive intent, feels like one of the biggest shifts to me. What's been one of the things that you spotted and you've liked about this Clement revolution, if we're labelling it that, so far?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I don't know if I've said it on this podcast before, but I like the way that they build up now. I think it's much better, and that kind of does play into your point about actually playing forward every time they have it, because you can try and do that in every scenario with every team, and a lot of them it would be a terrible idea, because if you don't have the quality to pick out the right passes in that scenario, you don't have the tactics where you know where the movements are going to be, you know where each player needs to be in those scenarios, then you can try and play forward every time, but ultimately it will just end up with not having much possession, because you won't be able to find the passes, and having fans getting even more frustrated, because as a fan watching in the stand, there really is nothing more frustrating than seeing a misplaced pass or seeing possession wasted. And I think that's what people sometimes, I'm going off a bit on a tangent here, but that's what people sometimes forget when they say just get it forward, how annoying it feels when they do that and it doesn't work. So that's why I think the build-up structure is so important, because so often it was like you'd have a coach like Liam Manning saying, I do want to play attacking football, I want to be proactive. And I genuinely believe him. I think if he was given the choice, you can play defensive football and you can watch your team defend for the whole of the game and have 30% possession, or you can have 70% and attack all the time and create loads of chances and win 4-0. Obviously, every coach would want attacking football. But the thing was, to be honest, he and his coaching team just weren't good enough at setting up the structure to do that. So I think Clement having two midfielders deep in that kind of possession phase, I think finding ways of getting right on the ball as well, and I think they use the wide areas a little bit better to kind of suit the types of players they have out there at the moment, who obviously aren't really traditional wingers. So I like that. I like the rotation. I think that was actually a really important part of Daniel Farke's team, and the way that they got their better players on the ball was a lot of them had a lot of freedom to pop up basically anywhere on the pitch that they wanted. So as long as the positions were always covered by someone, then you could kind of move around, and I think that makes it really hard for defenders to know where they're going and to kind of keep up with those players all the time. I think Manning's football is actually a good example of where if the structure is too rigid and everyone is in the same position all the time, you can't really create that space by running into areas and getting there before defenders, or taking defenders with you and opening up space elsewhere. So I think the rotation has been really important. But overall, I think, yeah, the way that they've tactically got the same intentions, I think, and Manning, as I said, probably did want to play attacking football, but you need to work out in more detail how you're going to do that, because this is the Championship. It's not Sunday League football where you can say, where a standout tactic would be let's play out from the back, and then that genuinely is a way of playing. In Championship football, you need complex tactics where players know where they have to be at certain times, because you can bet the opposition is going to have them. So I think they've just put in that structure, not just in the sense that they have to be in the same places all the time, but they've got ways they know of progressing the ball. I think that's been really, really important, because, yeah, like you, I would much, much, much rather see them play with intent and play forward every time they get it. But if you try that and you don't have the structure, you just lose the ball. So I think that's been really important.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to go down a tangent either, but I think when we speak about kind of styles and what fans like to watch, I think we can talk about short passing, long passing, possession-based football, pressing-based football. I think that intent is what they want to see, that want to go toe-to-toe with people, to win the ball, to be positive in your actions and in your decision-making. That ultimately, and of course to win games as well, which is primarily the most important thing. But that feels to me a lot more what people want to see, rather than, we mentioned, again, I keep going back there, but where they were, where they'd concede a goal or even they'd score a goal and they'd become very passive, they'd drop deep. I mean, you mentioned that, Paddy, in terms of the Leicester game I go back to when they were winning 1-0, and the changes that he made were reactive and they were negative, and the team became negative and passive, and they did in moments of adversity. And that has also been a good point about this week. They went behind at Sheffield United, they kept going. QPR, they conceded an equaliser shortly after they took the lead, they kept going. Today, I think they had 4 minutes after the equaliser went in, they kept going. That almost bounce back ability, those layers of resilience feel like they've been added as well. And what makes that all the more impressive, Paddy, is yes, it's a threadbare squad, and we've spoken about that a lot, but also the age of the squad as well. You go for Kovacevic, less so, but Fisher still hasn't made 100 appearances in the Championship. Rory McConville, I don't think had made 20 before he'd started in this kind of run of games. Harry Darling clearly is the season campaigner of that back four. Ben Krasene, still a young man. Pelle Matson hadn't played in England before. Kenny McLean obviously does have a lot of experience. Emmanuel Forson hasn't played a lot of football since joining Norwich. Jacob Wright hasn't played a lot of football as a number 10 all this season. Oscar Schwartau, still 19. Jovon Makama, still a very young man, first season in the Championship. To get what he got today, with the structure, with the clarity, with all of the kind of tactical layers, but also to get past the age and the inexperience of it, and to make them function against the team who have been expensively assembled, do have a lot of experience, have players in there that were playing Premier League football last season. That kind of sums up, I guess, the job that he's done in such a short period of time with this group of players that, as you said, looked pretty frazzled beforehand. Yeah,
I mean, as you click through the age, one of my pointers was on the front four, and Forson was the senior statesman at 22 out of those four. But when you go through the whole side, you're talking very early 20s, I think, on the average age front. Sorry, Kenny, but that is, again...
Well, to be fair, Harry Darling was called a donkey today, so, you know... this.
We'll leave that one there. But that was... it's we don't want to continue to... The point of difference is Clement, but, to put that team on the park against probably the most informed side in the Championship, who were in the Premier League as a club last season, who have Premier League players. I mean, Jovon Makama's duelling with a Championship title winner in Harwood Bellis, and Jack Stevens, the captain, plenty of Premier League experience, multiple spells with Saints. So that's the grade of opponent they face today, and ostensibly a very young Norwich team. And the resilience point, it's an interesting one on that, because Clement said post-match tonight that he actually wants to get to a point, if they're not already there, where he doesn't have to talk about the resilience that they've shown in adversity and to come back when they fall behind or when they get pegged back like they did today, because he wants that to be part of their DNA, effectively, that is in there. And he said, of course, you don't take that for granted, and if there was any sign that it wasn't there, then he has to reinforce the point. But it's almost, he wants that baked into a Norwich team who take the park, and the Philippe Clement in the Championship, no matter, we go in front, good, we'll have the game management to sit on that lead and add to the lead, because of how we want to proactively go about the task. But if the opposite's true and we face a bit of adversity, be that we get pegged back or we fall behind, no matter, this group of players know what they need to do. They stick to the plan, stick to the structure. They don't let that disappointment weigh them down collectively and individually, and it's just a mentality. And again, he is hoping they've now, particularly with today's events against that opponent, they've reached that point already, which in 6 games... And there is a parallel, and it is a pertinent one, because I now remember Manning saying that in that first spell, almost probably up to, the manner of how they went to Portsmouth, and Kovacevic saved a penalty that day, and they had to dig in for dear life, and they got the win at a very difficult place, as we know, to go to in Fratton Park.
Coventry as well.
Coventry as well. But that Portsmouth game, it was almost... I remember him saying after the game that the primary aim when they'd first come in the door was to instill those behaviours, as he used to like that phrase, that
Did he?
mentality. Yeah, once or twice you might have heard that. But it was almost the tactical and structural side couldn't wait, but it was secondary to reprogramming almost a group of players that they have that mentality and that belief. Well, you would argue subsequent events, subsequent games thereafter, that wasn't the case, and they wasn't successful in that mission. This guy, again, the sample is still relatively small, but to have gone to Sheffield and did what they did there, to gone and done what they've done today against Southampton, it does feel like it is becoming ingrained, and that is simply down to the work of Philippe Clement. He is clearly a very astute manager of players, and then you overlay the tactical nous. It's a good combination to have a tactically astute head coach who can get the best out of people by getting between their ears. I think most Norwich fans will sign for that, given what's gone before, both with Torrup and with Manning, because there was clearly deficiencies in those two pillars when you look at how they set about the craft. So at the third attempt, let's hope Ben Napper's hit the jackpot.
Let's hope so. Part two, we're going to be zooming in some more on those impressive performances and also the game in a bit more detail. See you in a second. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, reflecting on another home win. You wait 7-8 games for a Carrow Road win, and two come along in succession. That's the way it goes. Over Southampton today with Norwich City, and things looking a bit brighter in the world of Norwich City. Sam, I think because there are so many individuals that we could talk about in a moment, and this is why I'm laying the ground for you guys. In a moment, I'll basically ask either of maybe we'll run through all of us to kind of pick one to wax lyrical about and speak about in a bit more detail. But I did want to start with Jovon Makama, who two goals, took both of them very well. The first one in particular I liked because it was proper striker instinct, wasn't it? Attack the front post. Lovely cross from Jacob Wright, of course, as well. But it was the type of movement we hadn't really seen from him in the first half, and it was a big opportunity for him today, because whenever Norwich City have that Josh Sargent hole, there's always a void to fill, and I can imagine he probably felt quite a bit of pressure, particularly given, obviously, I know it was a Lazarus-like recovery, but Mateusz Chriskoren as well on the bench, fitness-wise or in any context, is a big thing given the money Norwich spent on him. And to score 2 goals, to have ultimately been the match winner, obviously along with that Kovacevic penalty save, that must have felt pretty good for that young man.
Yeah, definitely, and I thought it was probably a really big moment for him as a striker, because I think you look at his profile, the way that he plays, he's done pretty well out wide, and I would imagine that with Josh Sargent coming back, he will, for the majority of his Norwich career at least, have to play out there. But I think everyone can see that he probably has more of a profile of a striker. Certainly, if he goes on to play at the top level, I think it will be as a number 9. So for him to go up there, as many have in Josh Sargent's absence, since he became the sort of key player for Norwich that he has been, Ante Sienat's last season, various different ones under the David Wagner era.
Sidney Van Hooijdonk.
Van Hooijdonk, Ida, Juan.
Liam Gibbs, of course, as well.
Yeah, Liam Gibbs. Yeah. I mean, there's not loads of competition when you lay them out like that. But you think about the number of players who have kind of been seconded to that position and just look miles off Sargent. The fact that Norwich were able to play that game and play as well as they did, they may have won without Sargent before, but I'm not sure they've actually performed as well as they have without him since then. And I think a big part of that is actually their similarities. I asked Sargent a few weeks ago whether he felt like there were similarities between them, and he kind of played down that idea. But I think when you look at the way that he plays, there are quite a lot. I think he could, I said this to you in the first half, I think he could probably drop deeper more often, get on the ball and maybe kind of spray it wide and then get in the box a little bit later sometimes. But apart from that, the sorts of runs in behind, the physicality, the finishing, some of the work on the ball when he does get on it, I think it really reminds me quite a lot of Josh Sargent. There was one moment, I think it was after he'd scored both of the goals, where he kind of turned a defender on the halfway line. Yeah, it was when Marcondes had it in the net, but the referee had given a foul before. And to be fair, Makama did let the ball run away from him. But I saw a bit of Josh Sargent in that, the way that he kind of got away from a defender, used his power to get into the box. And I think that's probably what Norwich need, because you look at all of those players that we just listed who have tried to replace him before. Some of them are fairly decent players with decent goal-scoring records elsewhere, but I don't think you could say any of them are a like-for-like replacement with Sargent. I think Makama has been both the most successful and the most similar replacement for Sargent so far that we've seen up front. So I think for Norwich and what they need when their star player isn't available, and also for his own career, where I think that's probably the best position for him going forward, there were some really, really good signs, because I don't think Norwich have anyone else who could step up as a striker in that way. And obviously he was the match winner. Ultimately they're judged on goals. Scored 2 goals that maybe the second one wasn't his prettiest. I thought the first one actually was a really nice piece of movement to get there in the first place. But they were strikers' goals, and I thought that was really encouraging as well.
I tell you who he reminds me of as a 9 is Cameron Jerome, in that I don't think he's the cleanest finisher in the world, and I think we saw that in the first half. There was a kind of half opportunity that he got that he blazed over, and obviously he could maybe use the Watford example as well, but he's powerful, he'll run all day for you, he's clearly got the physicality there. I still think he needs to learn to kind of use his very big frame a little bit more effectively than he does at times, but it's good we're sat here talking about stuff that there is for him to improve on, and more crucially, Paddy, is that Philippe Clement clearly feels that. I mean, I asked him about Jovon a couple of weeks ago, and he said that he was at 30%. I think he said he'd gone up to 50 today, which is good, but he's clearly got a head coach that believes in that potential. And we could probably broaden this out to a recruitment point more widely, because there will be a lot of fans out there who want Norwich to sign more Jovon Makamas in terms of players that are excelling lower down the EFL and handing them an opportunity to come up. I know that was a point, again, that was put to Clement, and he didn't really care what the passport was. It's about kind of the player in question. But that is a point a lot of fans will be making as well, in terms of where he's come from and how they signed him ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously pros and cons. I don't, for me, it should never be... you have a blank sheet of paper and will either only go to the domestic market or go to the overseas market. Surely it has to be a hybrid approach, and it's just whether the balance has been too far skewed the other way. I mean, there's, as always with these recruitment debates, we've had them this season. Whenever we do, you can have a debate at a fixed point in time, and you reach one set of conclusions, and then you roll it on again, and whether in a good or a negative fashion, because of how said players have performed in the intervening period, it's a very different nuance to the debate later on. I think the only real definitive time you can probably judge recruitment is, well, Clement says any player needs 12 months minimum, so it is probably a season and a half before you can say yes, that was a good piece of recruitment, or that wasn't. But for the outlay, and those who believe very firmly that there are gems to be mined in lower league clubs, then yes, you would be mad not to explore those avenues, and clearly they are, because that's how else did they arrive at Jovon Makama in the first place? Roll it back a summer before, Lucien Mahovo, look at the strides he made from coming out of not a huge body of work at Notts County, was it? Yep. I think so there is very clearly within Norwich's recruitment a body of work going on, looking at domestic talent lower down the pyramid. So for me, that's, it's not why aren't they doing it? They are doing it. Clearly they are doing it. There's 2 case studies I've pointed to. It's just whether they need to accentuate that. But then it becomes a bigger question of the finances that are usually normally associated with domestic players, as opposed to value in other markets, maybe overseas. And there's a whole myriad of factors in play. But that is the checks and balances that you're now Ben Napper and your Lee Dunn going into this January's window, with clearly some strong input from Clement, that they're going to try and navigate a path through. That it'll be interesting. It will be interesting, actually. What markets and territories do they bring players in from in January, and that might tell us a lot about the influence Clement has exerted, I think.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Look, before we go down to individuals, and maybe I'm taking them all here, but I think we've got to sort of have a wider discussion about Pelle Mattsson, who's probably been the standout since Philippe Clement came in. I mean, I turned to, I don't know who, it was one of you guys, and basically said it's almost like they had his cousin for the first half of this season, and now Pelle Mattsson's turned up five games ago. I mean, the transformation in him is absolutely remarkable. He's gone from a player that looked lightweight. I've rolled this stat out a few times, but in the last 3 of Liam Manning's games, didn't make or win a single tackle. You look at him now, and he's it looks like he could be played in a rugby game, and it'd be in the middle of a scrum. That's kind of the intensity that he plays with. The ground he covers, the way he uses the ball, he looks a real talent, Sam, and to take that on from kind of Paddy's point in terms of just how quickly a bit of recruitment can change and the perception around it can change.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because Clement keeps talking about actually almost the opposite of the point you've made there. That, I mean, you said that stat there, he didn't make a tackle in the last 3 games of Manning's tenure. He said he was actually seeing kind of energy and tackles and a willingness to show that he was physical enough for the Championship, but not the work on the ball. And this is one of the rare moments so far that I'm going to have to disagree with him, because I actually thought early on there were some signs of a decent ball player in there. But actually he did look kind of lightweight for the Championship, as you said, and he did look like he was still getting used to it, and maybe it was a bit quick for him and things like that. And I actually think he's added loads of that, that stuff, that tackling, that aggression. That I love the fact that he will jump into a tackle and immediately within half a second he'll be back on his feet. He doesn't see, he's kind of no nonsense in that sense, and you get the sense he's a sort of player you think really loves playing football, and I think most people who love football will love watching him as well, because he does a bit of everything. He's got the quality. He's a real all-rounder actually, and really that's exactly what you want a centre mid to do. I think him and McLean are 2 examples of that, really. Both of them can do a good amount of everything with a good amount of quality, and as long as you've then got the specialists elsewhere in the pitch, and they can get them the ball, and they can allow them to either create chances or do the really tough last ditch defending, I think that's exactly what you need from midfielders. So I think he's been absolutely fantastic. And that recruitment point, yeah, to be fair, there are some now who are paying off. Oscar Schwartau is a good example. I don't know if we're going to come on to him, whatever. Jacob Wright as well. But Maatsen has really, really quickly gone from a player who looked not great to now a fantastic piece of recruitment for, was it 2.7 million? I think the surprising bit for me, and this maybe spells out where maybe their priorities should have been a little bit better in the summer. I say this all the time, so I don't know if I've said it on camera already, but the fact that they went and bought Mirko Topic for more money in the same position, and he actually ended up being the choice in midfield before Marcelino Nunez then went, and they needed another one. Probably spells out that the decision making in terms of which players they get hasn't been perfect at times, but ultimately, they've got him in the door. I think they've paid a fantastic price based on what we've seen in the last few games. Now, obviously, consistency is the challenge, but from what Clement said and the way that he operates, you'd back him over any other head coach to be able to get that out of him and stay on top of his work and kind of stop him regressing. So, really, really encouraging. And to be fair to Ben Napper and his recruitment team, we may end up giving them credit for a lot of players, but, right now, the large portion of the recruitment doesn't look great. That certainly is a win for me as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of get where Clement's coming from. I think he's essentially trying to, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but my interpretation of what he is saying, and I would maybe make this point, is it felt to me in the early stages of him coming in, he looked like a classic case of player coming in from overseas who's trying to show that they can, they're physical enough and they're robust enough and they can adapt quick enough to the league without probably the substance on the ball. I think that's probably what he's trying to sell, the clarity on the ball of what to do when you then get it. But yeah, I agree. I felt he looked quite lightweight and it was never a endeavour point. It was never a work rate point. I think it was just maybe positional points at times. And again, we can talk about the wider structure of that. But yeah, I mean, it's been remarkable, Paddy, hasn't it, to see the uplift in his performances and his levels.
And also midweek, that scenario where they're looking around for a captain and Philippe Clement jokingly sort of says, well, none of them have been captains, but he did land on Pelle Maatsen. So that tells you about the guy's character and his leadership potential and his standing maybe already within that group of players. And it is remarkable. I mean, there's absolutely no debate that he was found lacking physically. The 2 incidents that stand out, the way that Villagine bounced off him for that Ipswich goal, as good a strike as it was, and then the one at Derby where he got brushed off on the byline, they cut it back and that was the winner that night. That is not a central midfielder in the Championship. who is going to have a very long career if they're not able to get about the pitch and that physical intensity to their work. Night and day now, night and day. It was like there was 3 Pelle Matsons on the pitch at times today. He's just everywhere. What an engine he has. I mean, I don't dig into running stats and performance, but he must be right up there now with the rest of the championship sort of in terms of miles, kilometres covered. But he does have quality on the ball, and goes back to the point we discussed earlier. Is progressive, his passing. He is looking forward. He can thread a ball through. Maybe we need to just take a step back now from what the narrative was post Nunes, that why have they got Topic, why have they got Maatsen? These are 2 very functional central midfielders. There's a lack of creativity. I'm not saying he will emerge into an Emi Buendia style creative fulcrum, but he clearly has ability, technical ability on the ball, and what he also has now is I'd imagine a growing belief that under this head coach, I'm not in deep water, I'm not struggling to cope here. Am I good enough for this league, this team? I think he clearly now believes that, because it is stamped through the authority showing in his performance levels. And again, the tantalising thing with him, with Makama, with all these other players is this is head coach who's only getting started. What will he be able to extract from these players over a period that runs from now to May and beyond?
Yeah, and that is the big question. We've had the playoffs and Emi Buendia mentioned in this podcast, so no one can accuse us of getting carried away. Right, I've given you enough time, Sam. We've kind of mentioned those 2. Who else would you like to kind of put in the conversation that you've enjoyed? Well, maybe today, but you can broaden it out to maybe the last week.
May as well go for Jacob Wright. I think he's obviously already had a bit of a mention, but I think the adaptation to the number 10 position is what's kind of impressed me the most. I think based on how he's played, probably even if he'd been in that regular sort of number 6, number 8 position that we've seen more of him in, that he probably would have upped his levels. But he's gone, even a level beyond that in that number 10 position. And I never would have said that before, because he looked like somebody who maybe needed a bit more time on the ball, liked to sort of get his head up and see what was ahead of him before making a decision on the pass. Clearly very nice technique, but I wouldn't have said he's hasn't got that kind of low centre of gravity, ability to take players on, that kind of ingenuity and seeing a pass that nobody could ever see, that you kind of want from a number 10. So I actually remember when Clement first brought him on as a number 10. I think it was at Carrow Road, just for like a late substitution. And this shows that he knows more about football tactics than me. But I was kind of thinking, like, what are you doing putting him there? I thought it was a kind of Liam Gibbs up front type scenario, to be honest. But since then, it's worked perfectly. I thought at Sheffield United there were a couple of really nice flicks, passes to Sargent round the corner and stuff, which were completely the opposite of what I was just talking about in terms of having time on the ball, seeing the picture. When he had sort of a couple of defenders around him, not much time to think about it, not much space, and he was still able to find a pass or do something creative on the edge of the box. And I think he did that a few times today as well, and then obviously comes up with the quality for the 2 goals. A really, really, if he doesn't put that pace and that exact accuracy on that first cross for Makama's first goal, he can't just glance it in. It's a difficult finish if there isn't enough pace on that cross. So that was really, really good. And then swings another one in, quite a hard one when the ball's been kind of bobbling around and it comes to him on the half volley. He still picks out Harry Darling's head perfectly, whatever happened thereafter for the goal. So moments of quality when it really matters. Throughout the game, I think he's good at kind of keeping possession, keeping things ticking over, even in that number 10 position. And then the stuff that, like I said, I didn't think he had in his locker to play there, he's really, really pulled out. And like Paddy said, I think it's been a bit of a problem position. I think we and a lot of Norwich fans have been saying for a while they need to go and get a kind of creative, proper number 10 rather than just a sort of number 8 or a winger. And I never would have thought it was Jacob Wright, but I think based on the evidence of the last couple of games, he's kind of getting there. And again, let's not get carried away. He still needs to add some consistency there. And, it could end up in the same way that, we were talking about Kenny McLean playing number 10 at Everton a few years ago. We could end up looking in a few months going, do you remember when Jacob Wright was actually immense at number 10 for a couple of games when he's back in his regular central midfield position? So he does need to go on and prove it in the future. But I never would have seen it going this well in the first couple of games. So kudos to him for that.
Yeah, it gives them more defensive security, doesn't it, as well, out of possession when they are having to hold that shape centrally because of obviously his experience in deeper positions. Paddy, who are you choosing or landing upon?
Well, I mean, you probably would be looking at Fisher, McConville, not just today, but over the piece under Clement. I mean, Fisher got referenced by Clement post-match, which was actually a question about Krezeni and his return, and Mahovo, hopefully not far behind him. And he said, well, if you're going to talk about young fullbacks, then let's have it right. Kellen Fisher, in his words, I think, said he's been outstanding for him. And you see elements of his game that, understandably, he still needs to work on. But that's the same. We just talked about Jacob Wright. That's the same for him. We just talked about Jovon Makama. That's natural, but it feels like he's a player who has had a body of championship exposure now, and he's coming through the other side, and he plays like a man who feels he's comfortable in that environment now, and his personality is coming through. I mean, there was that lovely run at Sheffield United where you're not doing that if you're not confident in the trust you've got from the head coach and your belief on the pitch to go pick it up in your own half and go slaloming past 2 or 3, and then the composure. I think he rolled in Makama at Bramall Lane that night. But he is only going one way, and that's upward. And then McConville, he has had to be incredibly patient and probably felt at one point this season, with January in mind, I'm going to have to get out here to get some game time because it's simply not happening for me. A move that is probably not giving him the career lift he was hoping for when he left Brighton. But he's an unfussy type. I don't think you're necessarily going to, recognise anything eye-catching from him in terms of his craft, but just plays within, the comfort zone of what he can do and what he can't do. He leaves alone, and alongside Darling, they've got a nice understanding. They strike me as 2 very calm individuals, I think, in terms of personality, and it's a blend that's working very well. And more to the point, Clement at the moment, with an increasing number of available centre-backs, is settling on those 2. So they clearly are doing something right in his view. And again, 2 young players within a cohort of younger players who are now coming to the fore and maybe underlining what the philosophy is at this club, which is to develop young talent in the short term to improve Norwich, but then maybe down the track, of course, there's the transfer element to this. And if you see lineups like we've seen today in terms of the populated by so many young players and they're getting results against teams like Southampton at this level, then it's a win-win. You're improving Norwich's status, but you're also building up your asset base. And that, as we're told liberally, is probably the key pillar of what Atanasio, Norfolk Holdings, Ben Napper are trying to do with this club. And when you see the evidence of it today in that environment, you can see, they do have some young players of some promise under a head coach who probably can build on the talent they've got, and to do that, they're going to have to drive Norwich forward in the short to mid-term, and long may that continue, because I think for too long this season there would have been a lot of fans questioning, well, we're told that it's about developing young talent. Where is the young talent? Where is the next John Rowe? Where is the next younger player coming through that they've developed to sell on? I think if you continue in this fashion, and again, caveat, big asterisks, very small sample, but we get to next summer and it's not a good thing to be talking up potential players who could be sold, but the reality is that that's the position they're going to try and engineer, that they do have saleable assets, but that'll only happen if Norwich have been successful. And at the moment, you see that team sheet, you see how they perform, and you think, okay, if they can add the consistency to the game, and I think that's going back to Fisher, is where he's adding that now. He's come in, and there's periods where he's looked a good player, looked a real promising player, and then there's periods where he's struggled and it's not helped. He's been shunted around positionally. Torup had him trying to almost step into midfield and be this inverted option as well. All of that is very difficult, I'd imagine, for a young player who just simply wants to feel comfortable in championship surroundings. But now he looks like he's adding that consistency to his game, and if he adds that element, then there's no doubt the talent is there. So, it's exciting to see that there's raw material there, and under a coach like Clement, he might be able to fashion it into something a bit more from potential to actual tangible product that they can, as I say, in the short term, improve their team, but also with a view always with Norwich under this ownership to build up that asset base, because that's so important in terms of reinvesting and then making the team better over time, and then ultimately emulating, which is, we know, the stated aim, the Brightons and the Brentfords, Premier League, and then stay there.
So you start over Stacey for you now, do you think?
All day long.
Yeah, I think I'm there as well. I'll throw Oscar Schwartau in, more so probably for the Watford performance than today, although I thought there was some really nice stuff today. That moment where he won the ball and sort of ran across the byline and put a cross in was good. There was one in the second half where he nutmegged, I think, Flynn Downs and then got fouled, and Norwich went on and attacked. I just think there's a young player there who, and I've said this a few times, I think when he goes in terms of goals and assists, I think he'll explode. Because the technical ability is there. I think he's got the physicality, the way he kind of glides through games is really nice to see. And I think he, to be fair, I thought he was one of the very few bright points under Manning towards the end. I think he has kicked on again under Philippe Clement. It's just probably, we mentioned consistency with Fisher, it's probably now that consistency in terms of output with him, but I think we are getting to a stage now where we're beginning to see him getting better positions in and around the box. I mean, that one late on where I was just absolutely begging Marcondes to roll it across to him, and the position that he kind of got himself in, the goal at Watford, which was created by Sargent's movement, to be fair, but again, even that intent to get to the back post and to try and score a goal, the cross that he delivered was absolutely exquisite last week and pinpoint. That's now the next step for him, I think, in terms of all of the other stuff and his ability to play at championship level. I think we've seen that now. It's about, can he now contribute and be effective from a goal contributions perspective in the championship, and if he does that, I think Norwich are going to have quite some attacking talent on their hands. Let's just kind of tidy up the bits around the edges. I know we've kind of joked about the second goal, but let's go through it chronologically, Sam. The penalty, there was quite a noisy negative reaction inside Carrow Road. There always is when there's going to be a penalty against Norwich, let's be honest. Any complaints, do you think, on that one that they can have?
Not really, not having seen it back. I think in the stadium at the time I kind of felt the same, because it looked, I mean, to be fair, it was a terrible shot in the end anyway, but it looks, again, like the ball's gone. It also took the ref a long while to make the decision, so I could see why people were angry, but I think he quite clearly catches him. He's quite clearly late, so yeah, probably no complaints on that one, I don't think.
No, me neither. And then Paddy, of course, the second goal that Norwich scored, which clearly is going to get the attention. Is I don't see anything wrong with it personally, but it's going to be on Makama's finish and the use of his hand. It wasn't deliberate. He's not tried to punch it or anything. It's just hit his hand and gone in. But we know what the rules are. You can't score with your hand. And if we were in a VAR world, which thankfully we're not, but if we were, that would have been disallowed. My argument would be, I think if we were in a VAR world, I think the goal gets disallowed, no debate about it. I don't think anyone who knows anything about football would debate that. But then I think we'd probably be in a world where we're looking at the one before that, where Darling heads the ball and it basically lands at Makama's path off the hand of the Southampton defender, which if you look at it is raised. I wouldn't say it's in a particularly natural position. So I think we basically would have got to a situation where Norwich probably would have had a penalty there.
Yeah. We don't need to debate.
That's fine. Speak to me about the other one then, the goal that Norwich got disallowed. Maybe there's a degree of balancing things out here, but obviously Marcondes put the ball in the back of the net. Makama, was judged to have fouled a Southampton man in the build-up. Any sort of thoughts on that one?
I'd have to see it back again if I'm honest, but I don't know whether there was a slight element of Southampton players stopping when the ball rolled on for Marcondes to finish. Yeah, so I think that action or that element to it, the action, probably wouldn't have played out as it did. But no, the actual challenge, I just thought he kind of almost lost his balance and they basically collided. So I thought it was a little bit harsh, if I'm honest. But yeah, I think in real time it felt like maybe the Southampton players stopped because they knew they were getting the foul. So that for me wouldn't have rolled on to be a goal. I think they'd have probably got to Marcondes before that point. But yeah. No, I mean, anybody who walks away, and to be fair, the Southampton manager, he was pretty matter-of-fact about it. There was no sense of injustice or they'd been robbed or anything like that. I mean, he did push back at a suggestion that did Norwich deserve to win the game. I don't think he probably felt they deserved to win the game, but he did acknowledge it was a very good performance from Norwich and, their his team, he didn't think probably hit the heights that they threatened to do in that very accomplished, I thought, opening 10-15 minutes
agreed.
where they hit the bar, and the way they were moving the ball around and beating Norwich's press, you feared it could be a long afternoon. So I think his frustration was more towards his own players dropping their levels, particularly off the back of 6 wins in 7, than anything to do with officials or officiating and key decisions.
Which is quite refreshing, to be fair, because I
Absolutely,
think, he probably had merit on that second goal to really pin the defeat on that. So yeah, fair play that he didn't. How festive are you boys feeling at the moment? Quite.
Preston away might ruin it.
Well, that was what I was going to come on to. I mean, nothing speaks Christmas more than a nice trip to Preston the Saturday before the big day. It's going to be fun, Sam.
Yeah, I'm buzzing, mate. Are you buzzing?
Yeah, I can't wait. As you know, it's all the Christmas festivities. You have the carols on, the films on, and then you have a completely pointless long away trip the Saturday before. That's the way these things roll.
Well.
It is an early kill, so that is an upside. At least we get home a little bit earlier, which is
Any single person who's bought an away ticket. If it was less than 10, I wouldn't be surprised.
And could you blame any of them either?
No.
But there will be plenty there, I am sure, and hopefully they are rewarded again with a really good performance and another step of progress. That is when our next podcast will come. We will be with you after that result at Deepdale, and then looking ahead to what is, as much as it is a long trip next weekend to Preston, you get the upsides then of at least 2 home Carrow Road festive games, Boxing Day and the 29th.
Yeah.
Against Charlton and Watford, which I think they can really attack now, and we can really go in with feeling some optimism, and that is the energy and the turnaround that Philippe Clement has implemented so far at Norwich City. Let's hope, and this is going to be the next question, can they sustain it? Thank you very much for joining us on the show this evening. We'll see you again for the next one. If you've watched on YouTube or listened via your preferred podcast player, thank you very much for doing so. We'll see you soon.